Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Lie. Simon Christensen stood in his garage workshop, carefully applying wood stain to a rocking chair he'd been building for weeks. 16 years in special operations had taught him patience, precision, and the value of working with his hands. Now, at 42, he channeled those skills into furniture making, a peaceful contrast to his former life. "Dad, watch this." 7-year-old Emma called from the driveway, attempting a cartwheel while her twin brother Noah filmed on his tablet. Simon smiled, wiping his hands on a rag. These kids were his world. After leaving the military 3 years ago, he'd thrown himself into being present. Soccer games, school projects, bedtime stories. Everything he'd missed during deployments. "Beautiful form, sweetheart," he called back. His wife Denise appeared in the doorway, dressed in designer workout clothes despite never actually working out. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless even at 9 in the morning. She'd changed over the past year. More distant, always on her phone, frequent spa weekends with friends Simon had never met. "I'm going out," she announced, not quite meeting his eyes. "Marva's having a crisis. Might be late." Marva James was supposedly Denise's best friend from college, though Simon had only met her once at a Christmas party 2 years ago. He'd noticed the pattern. Whenever Denise needed an alibi, Marva was having a crisis. "Everything okay?" Simon asked, studying her face with the same attention he'd once used to read enemy territory. "Fine. Just girl stuff." She kissed the air near his cheek, her perfume expensive and unfamiliar. "Don't wait up." As her Range Rover disappeared down their suburban Seattle street, Simon felt the old instincts prickling at the base of his skull. Something was off. Had been for months. He tried talking to her, suggesting counseling, but she'd shut him down every time. His phone buzzed. Roger Villanueva, his former teammate and best friend, now working private security in Portland. "Coffee next week? Got something to discuss." Simon frowned at the cryptic message. Roger wasn't the cryptic type unless something was wrong. "Tuesday work. Make it sooner if you can." The twins ran inside, arguing about whose cartwheel was better. Simon shelved his concerns and followed them in, referee duty calling. What he didn't know was that Denise wasn't going to Marva's house. She was driving to a storage unit on the outskirts of town, where Darren Lopez waited with a briefcase containing $250,000 in cash, the first half of her payment to make her husband disappear. Chapter 2. Sharks Circling. Simon had always believed in trusting his gut. That instinct had kept him alive through Fallujah, Kandahar, and a dozen classified operations he couldn't discuss even with Roger. Now, 6 days after Roger's cryptic text, that same instinct was screaming. He sat in a downtown Seattle cafe, watching Roger approach through the rain-slicked windows. His old friend looked grim, carrying a manila envelope that he set carefully on the table between them. "I didn't want to bring this to you," Roger said without preamble. "Been wrestling with it for 2 weeks." Simon opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, Denise meeting with a man outside a motel. Not touching, not kissing, but the body language told a story. More photos showed cash changing hands. The last photo showed Denise with 3 men Simon didn't recognize. A tall Latino man with prison tattoos visible on his neck, a stocky redhead with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and a thin man with nervous eyes. "Who are they?" Simon kept his voice level, though his hands wanted to shake. "The tall one is Darren Lopez. Did 8 years in Walla Walla for armed robbery, aggravated assault. Out on parole. The redhead is Carlton Olson, enforcer type, suspected in 2 disappearances that could never be proven. The third is Randall Morrison, low-level con artist." And Simon. Roger leaned forward. "I pulled Denise's financials through a contact. She's been bleeding your accounts dry. Offshore transfers, closed accounts he didn't know about. The house. She refinanced it 6 months ago without your signature. Forged documents." The coffee turned to acid in Simon's stomach. "How much?" "Everything. Your military pension, the insurance payout from your father's death, the college funds for the twins. She's been systematically cleaning you out while setting up accounts in the Cayman Islands." Roger's jaw tightened. "There's more." I traced Lopez. He specializes in making problems disappear permanently. Simon's world tilted. The woman he'd loved for 12 years, the mother of his children, was planning to kill him. The kids, he said immediately. I don't think they're safe either. Roger pulled out another photo. Denise having coffee with a woman Simon didn't recognize. That's Letha O'Neill, works for a gray market adoption ring. Not legal, but not quite illegal. Facilitates private placements for people who want kids without paperwork. The implications hit Simon like a bullet. Denise wasn't just planning to kill him. She was planning to sell their children. How long? His voice came out flat, controlled. The combat calm settling over him like a familiar coat. Best guess? Soon. Maybe days. She's been liquidating final assets this week. Simon stood, his mind already working through tactical scenarios. I need you to do something for me. Can you get the kids somewhere safe without tipping her off? Already have a place lined up. My sister's cabin in Montana. Lauren's ex-military too. She'll keep them safe. Tomorrow, Simon decided. School field trip to the science center. Can you intercept them? Roger nodded. What are you going to do? Why do best, Simon said quietly. Set a trap. That night, Simon lay awake beside his wife, watching her pretend to sleep. She was scrolling through her phone under the covers, the light casting shadows on her face. He caught glimpses of text messages. Wednesday night. Make sure he's home alone. Kids need to be gone. His wife, the woman who'd cried at their wedding, who'd held his hand through 2 difficult births, who'd promised to love him forever, was planning his murder in 48 hours. Simon closed his eyes and began planning his counterattack. Chapter 3. The Trap Springs. Wednesday evening arrived with rain hammering against the windows. The twins were safely at Roger's sister's cabin. Denise thought they were at a sleepover at a friend's house that Simon had arranged, complete with fake permission slips and a burner phone that would text automated updates. Simon had prepared meticulously. He documented everything Roger found, uploaded copies to secure cloud storage with timed releases to the FBI, Seattle PD, and 3 separate news outlets. If he disappeared, the truth would emerge. But he had no intention of disappearing. He'd also reactivated something from his military days, a tracking device implanted in his molar during his last deployment. Standard issue for special ops working in hostile territory. The device connected to a dedicated military emergency frequency monitored 24/7 by his former unit. 1 byte activation, and extraction teams would mobilize. Denise had been increasingly nervous all day, checking her phone constantly. At 8 p.m., she suddenly announced she had to run to the pharmacy. The good painkiller for my headache, she explained, grabbing her purse. Be right back. She wouldn't be back. This was her exit strategy, establish an alibi at a public location while Lopez and his crew did the dirty work. Simon waited in his study, appearing to review furniture orders on his laptop. In reality, he was tracking the 3 men approaching his house via the security cameras he'd installed last year. Cameras Denise didn't know could feed to his phone. Lopez, Olson, and Morrison entered through the back door Denise had left unlocked. They moved with practiced stealth, spreading through the house. Simon let them come, timing his movements. When Olson entered the study first, Simon was ready. Simon Christensen? Olson's voice was rough. We need to talk. About what? Simon kept his hands visible, playing the confused civilian. About a debt you owe. The other 2 entered, flanking him. Morrison held zip ties. Lopez had a gun tucked in his waistband, visible enough to intimidate. They moved fast, professional. Within 60 seconds, Simon was secured to his office chair, zip ties cutting into his wrists. He didn't resist. Not yet. What's this about? He injected fear into his voice. I don't owe anyone money. Your wife does, Lopez said, pulling up a chair. She borrowed from some people. Borrowed a lot. And when people don't pay, he smiled without warmth. We collect other ways. Morrison was already searching the office, looking for valuables. Olson stood guard by the door. Then they heard the front door open. Denise walked in, and the mask finally dropped. Her face transformed, all the fake sweetness evaporating into cold calculation. Finally, she said, laughing. It wasn't the laugh Simon remembered from their wedding day or the delivery room. This was something else. Something broken and cruel. Finally free, she walked closer, her eyes glittering with something manic. 16 years I've played the perfect military wife. 16 years of you being gone, of raising kids alone, of pretending I gave a damn about your stupid furniture business. She leaned down, her face inches from his. You're dead, Simon. The kids will be gone, sold to a nice family in Singapore who pays top dollar for American kids. And I get everything. The insurance, the death benefits, all of it. The twins. Simon's voice cracked. Not entirely an act. Hearing it confirmed was still a knife to the chest. They're not even yours, Denise spat. Carlton is their real father. We've been together since before I met you. This was always the plan. Find some military sucker, wait for the benefits to pile up, then cash out. Simon looked at Olsen, saw the man smirk, and understood. The twins had Denise's blonde hair and blue eyes, but certain facial features he'd attributed to his own family. They matched Olsen's face. What happened to you? Simon asked quietly. The woman I married. Never existed. Denise cut him off. I'm a good actress. You were an easy mark. Now you're a dead man. Lopez checked his watch. We need to move. Helicopters waiting at the private airfield. Once we're over the Pacific, he goes and waited. As they prepared to move him, Simon bit down hard on his rear left molar. The tracker activated with a sensation like a small electric shock. Within 3 minutes, every military installation within 200 miles would receive his distress signal. Within 10 minutes, extraction teams would deploy. Through the window, Simon saw the first helicopter appear on the horizon, then the second. But they weren't Lopez's choppers. These were Black Hawks running dark, and they were coming in fast and low. Chapter 4, Thunder from Above. The Black Hawks descended on Simon's suburban neighborhood like birds of prey, their rotors churning the rain into horizontal sheets. Neighbors who'd been settling in for the evening suddenly found their quiet street transformed into a war zone. What the hell? Lopez spun toward the window, his hand going for his weapon. Simon's expression shifted. The fear vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. That would be my ride. Tactical teams fast-roped from both helicopters, hitting the ground in synchronized precision. These weren't local SWAT, they were Simon's former unit. The commander, Roger's recommendation, had pulled strings Simon didn't even know existed. You're military, Morrison stammered, finally understanding. You're not just 16 years special operations, Simon said calmly. Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies? Carlton Olsen moved first, tried to use Simon as a shield. Bad decision. The front door exploded inward, not breached but blown off its hinges by a controlled charge. Flashbangs followed, turning the world white and deafening. Simon had been expecting it. He'd closed his eyes and held his breath at the 3-second mark. The others hadn't. While Lopez, Olsen, and Morrison stumbled blind and disoriented, tactical operators flooded the house. Simon felt the zip ties on his wrists cut away by practiced hands. Welcome back, Captain Christensen, a familiar voice said. Lieutenant Dane Velasquez, who'd served under Simon in Afghanistan. Sorry for the dramatic entrance. Appreciated, Lieutenant. Simon stood, rubbing his wrists. His eyes found Denise, who'd been thrown to the ground and zip-tied by 2 operators. Her face was a mask of shock and rage. This isn't legal, she screamed. You can't just... Actually, Dane said pleasantly, producing a document. Emergency extraction of military personnel under active threat is covered under several statutes. Your husband activated a military-grade distress beacon. That makes this a legitimate rescue operation. He smiled without warmth. Everything here is by the book. Lopez tried to run. He made it 3 steps before an operator put him face first into the hardwood floor. Olsen surrendered immediately, hands up. Morrison looked like he might vomit. Simon approached Denise, crouching down to her level. She looked up at him with pure hatred. The kids, she hissed. You can't prove they're not. DNA test is already scheduled, Simon interrupted. But honestly, Denise, it doesn't matter. I've raised them. I'm their father in every way that counts. But you, he shook his head. You try to sell them. 7-year-old children. Your own children. They're Carlton's children. Then why was he so eager to sell them? Simon stood. Because you're both monsters. And monsters need to be caged. Dane gestured to his team. Secure the premises. I want everything documented. Phones, laptops, documents, all of it. As the three kidnappers were hauled away, Simon noticed Roger entering through the destroyed front door. Kids? Simon asked immediately. Safe. Lauren says Emma's already teaching her self-defense moves. Roger managed a grin, then his expression darkened. But Simon, there's more. The digital forensics team went through Denise's devices. This wasn't just about you and the kids. Show me. They moved to Simon's study, where a military tech specialist had already set up a laptop displaying recovered data from Denise's phone and computer. She's been running this scheme for years, Roger explained. You weren't the first. There was a Marine colonel in San Diego, died in a car accident 4 years before she met you. His life insurance paid out $800,000. Before that, an Army Ranger in North Carolina. Drowning incident. Another $500,000. Simon felt ice water run through his veins. How many? 4 confirmed, the tech specialist said. She was young, probably mid-20s, with sharp eyes behind military-issue glasses. Possibly 6. She's been working with Carlton Olson the entire time. They're a team. She targets military men with good benefits, marries them, bleeds them dry, then disposes of them. The kid's angle is new, though. Started with your twins. Because they're his, Simon said flatly. She actually loved him. The rest of us were just resources. Narcissistic sociopath is the clinical term, Roger said. The FBI's going to want to talk to you, but Dane's team bought us some time. Military extraction means they have jurisdiction for the next 72 hours. Simon looked at the data, his mind working through implications. Lopez. He's the key. He's done this before with Denise and Carlton. Multiple times. Already singing, Dane confirmed, entering the study. Amazing how cooperative people get when they realize they're facing federal murder charges. He's given us locations, dates, bank accounts. The whole operation. And Denise. Lawyered up immediately. But it won't matter. We have Lopez's testimony, digital evidence, the offshore accounts, everything. She's done. Simon should have felt relief. Instead, he felt hollow. 12 years of his life had been a lie. The woman he'd loved, the mother of Emma and Noah, had been planning to murder him from day one. The twins, he said quietly. They'll need therapy. They'll need their father, Roger interrupted. The man who's been there for them, who actually loves them. DNA doesn't make a parent, Simon. You know that. Simon nodded, but his mind was already turning to darker calculations. Denise would go to prison, yes. Lopez and Olson too. But prison felt insufficient for what they'd planned. For the other men they'd killed. For trying to sell Emma and Noah. The old operator in him, the part that had done wet work in places that officially didn't exist, began formulating a different kind of justice. I need some air, Simon said, heading for the back door. Outside, rain continued to fall. Simon stood in his backyard, looking at the swing set he'd built for the twins, and made a decision. Legal justice would happen, but he'd make sure the punishment fit the crime. Chapter 5. The Monsters Past. The FBI arrived at dawn, turning Simon's house into a crime scene. Agent Horace Sexton led the investigation, a barrel-chested man in his 50s with the weathered look of someone who'd seen humanity's worst and kept going anyway. Captain Christensen, Sexton said, offering his hand. Hell of a night you had. That's one way to put it. They sat in Simon's kitchen while forensic teams worked throughout the house. Sexton laid out photographs, the same men Roger had shown him, plus others. Victims. Darren Lopez started talking the moment he realized the death penalty was on the table, Sexton explained. He's a career criminal, but not stupid. He knows the only way he survives this is cooperation. He tapped a photo of a handsome man in marine dress blues. Major Eric Holloway. Died in a car crash in San Diego, 2019. Married to Denise Glass, your wife's maiden name, for 18 months. Another photo. Captain Randall Morrison. Wait, different Randall Morrison, Sexton clarified. Your kidnapper stole a dead soldier's identity. The real Morrison drowned during a training exercise in 2021, married to a woman named Denise Morrison for 2 years. For more photos followed. All military, all dead in accidents, all married to Denise under different names. She's a black widow, Simon said quietly. How did no one catch this? Different states, different names, years apart. She'd take the insurance money, disappear, resurface under a new identity, and start hunting again. Carlton Olson was her constant. He'd play different roles. Sometimes a brother, sometimes an old friend. They'd bleed the mark dry. Then Lopez would handle the disposal. The kids changed things. Yeah. Sexton's jaw tightened. FBI's been tracking Letha O'Neill's adoption ring for 3 years. Private placements, usually above board if ethically gray. But we've suspected darker transactions. Children sold to foreign buyers. No questions asked. Your twins are going to Singapore to a businessman named Juan Munoz. He paid $400,000. Up front. Simon's hands clenched. You stopped it. 2 hours ago. Singaporean authorities detained Munoz at his office. He's claiming he thought it was a legitimate adoption. We'll see. What about Denise? Sexton's expression grew harder. She's not talking. Her lawyer is Ben Ray. Expensive, connected, specializes in rich people who've done terrible things. He's already arguing entrapment, illegal search, claiming your military extraction violated her civil rights. Will it stick? No, but it'll drag out. 3 to 5 years before trial. Maybe more if he's smart about continuances and appeals. And even then, Sexton hesitated. She's got resources we haven't found yet. Offshore accounts, safe deposit boxes, properties under shell companies. She's been at this for over a decade. She knows how to disappear money. And if she makes bail, she won't. Not with 6 murder counts and child trafficking. But Simon, Sexton leaned forward. I need to be clear. This goes to trial. You'll testify. So will your kids. They'll ask Emma and Noah about their mother, about what they heard, what they remember. It'll traumatize them all over again. Simon already knew this. Had been thinking about it through the sleepless night. What are my options? Let's build a case. Keep yourself and the kids safe. Let the system work. The system that let her kill 6 men over 10 years. Sexton didn't have an answer for that. After the agent left, Simon found Roger in the backyard, smoking a cigarette he'd bummed off one of the forensic techs. You're thinking something dark, Roger said without preamble. I can see in your face. That operational look. They might get away with it, Simon said. Denise has money and a good lawyer. Lopez might flip on her, but good lawyers tear apart criminal testimony. Olson's claiming he thought Simon owed them money, that he was just muscle for a debt collection. Morrison's already trying to cut a deal, and you want to do something about it. I want them to understand what they took, who they hurt. Simon looked at his friend. You remember Kandahar? The warlord who was trafficking girls. Roger's expression shuddered. That was different. That was war. Was it, or was it justice the official channels couldn't deliver? They'd never spoken about it directly, the mission that didn't appear in any after-action report. The warlord who disappeared, his trafficking operation that had mysteriously collapsed, the girls who'd been quietly repatriated to their families. Simon, you're not that guy anymore. You're a father. You have kids who need you. I'm a father whose wife tried to sell his kids, who planned to feed me to sharks. Simon's voice stayed level, but something cold moved behind his eyes. I'm not talking about killing them, Roger, but I'm talking about making sure they face real consequences. The kind that stick. What are you planning? Nothing yet, but I'm going to make some calls. Talk to some people. Simon met his friend's eyes. Denise has been hiding money. The FBI can't find it all, but I bet I can. Because you know her. Because I've been watching her for months. I know her patterns, her tells. And I've got something she doesn't know about. Simon pulled out his phone, showing Roger an app. Security monitoring on her devices. I installed it 6 months ago when I first got suspicious. She doesn't know it's there. That's surveillance without consent. It'll never hold up in court. I don't need it for court, Simon said. I needed to find where she's hiding everything she stole. From me, from the other victims' families, from everyone she's ever conned. And once I find it, you'll what? Give it to the FBI? Simon smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Some of it. The rest? The rest goes to the families of her victims. Every widow, every child, every person she destroyed. They'll get their money back. And Denise? She'll face trial with a public defender and empty accounts. Roger studied his friend, then slowly nodded. I didn't hear any of that. But hypothetically, if you needed technical support, I'll let you know. As Roger left, Simon opened his laptop and began the real work. Denise thought she was smart, thought she'd hidden her tracks. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the man she'd tried to kill. Chapter 6. The Digital Hunt. Simon spent the next 3 days in his study. The room transformed into a command center. Roger had quietly provided military-grade decryption software and a secure VPN routing, technically illegal for civilian use. Simon didn't care. The security monitoring he'd installed on Denise's devices 6 months ago had been a calculated risk. She'd never suspected. Why would she? She'd spent 12 years thinking Simon was just a simple furniture maker, too trusting and too damaged by war to see what was happening under his own roof. Her mistake. The monitoring software captured everything. Keystrokes, browsing history, app usage, even screenshots at random intervals. Simon had years of data, but he focused on the last 6 months, the endgame of her plan. What he found was damning. Denise had been communicating with Carlton Olson through an encrypted app called SecureCom. She thought it was untraceable. It wasn't. The monitoring software captured her messages before encryption, raw and readable. Simon read through them clinically, divorcing emotion from analysis. It was easier that way. Simon's getting suspicious. We need to move the timeline up. The kids are young enough that Singapore won't ask questions. Munoz is ready to pay full price. Once this is done, we should take a break. Mexico, maybe? Somewhere we can lie low for a year. I love you. Always have. This is the last one. I promise. That last message had been sent to Carlton 3 weeks ago. She'd promised the same thing to him before. Simon found similar messages dating back years, tied to different operations and different victims. But more valuable than the messages were the financial records. Denise had been meticulous about tracking her assets. She had spreadsheets detailing every account, every shell company, every dollar she'd stolen. She'd kept digital records of it all, probably as insurance against Carlton or Lopez try to cut her out. Simon compiled everything methodically. Primary accounts in the Cayman Islands under the name Maureen Leon, $2.3 million. Secondary accounts in Switzerland under Elizabeth Sweeney, $1.8 million. Property holdings in Costa Rica, Panama, and Thailand under various LLCs, cryptocurrency wallets, gold certificates, even physical cash locations, safety deposit boxes in Seattle, San Diego, and Charlotte. In total, Denise had accumulated nearly $7 million from her victims over the years. Simon created a detailed file of every asset, then cross-referenced it with the FBI's victim list. Major Eric Holloway's family deserved compensation. So did Captain Randall Morrison's mother and 2 sisters. The other 4 victims had families too, widows, children, parents, all of whom had been financially devastated by Denise's schemes. He made a list, checked it twice, then began the careful work of accessing Denise's accounts. She'd been smart about security, using multi-factor authentication and biometric locks. But Simon had her phone, seized as evidence, but temporarily in his possession pending FBI analysis. Roger had borrowed it from the evidence room for an hour, just long enough. Simon worked through the night, transferring funds to new accounts he'd created using VPNs and cryptocurrency tumblers. Legal? No. Traceable back to him? Also no. He'd learned these skills in special operations, where money needed to move invisibly to fund off-book operations. By dawn, Denise's accounts were empty. $7 million redistributed into secure holding accounts. Then Simon made the harder calls. Mrs. Holloway? This is Simon Christensen. I have information about your husband's death. The conversations were difficult. Each widow or family member reacted differently. Shock, disbelief, anger, grief reopened. Simon explained patiently, The FBI investigation, the evidence, the truth about how their loved ones had died. And then he offered restitution. The FBI will recover some assets, he explained. But that process takes years. I've found additional funds that I'm able to return to victims' families immediately. Anonymous donations, untraceable, completely legal for you to receive. How much? They'd ask, not quite believing. Simon would tell them. Amounts that would cover mortgage payments, college funds, medical bills. Enough to rebuild what Denise had destroyed. Some were suspicious. Some cried. One widow, Captain Morrison's mother, Nona Kane, simply said, "Bless you. Whoever you are, bless you." By the end of the week, Simon had redistributed $6 million to victims' families. The remaining $1 million? That went into trust funds for Emma and Noah, shielded through layers of legal protection that would ensure they'd have resources when they turned 25. Denise would face trial with nothing. No resources to pay expensive lawyers. No funds to disappear if she somehow made bail. She'd be trapped in the system she thought she'd gamed. But Simon wasn't done. He met Roger at a diner in Tacoma, far enough from Seattle to be anonymous. "I need one more favor," Simon said. "The questionable kind." Roger sighed. "How questionable?" "Carlton Olson. He's the biological father of Emma and Noah. He also participated in at least 6 murders and planned to sell his own children for cash. Yeah, he's a piece of work. What about him? Prison has its own justice system. I need to make sure the right people know who he is and what he's done, especially the thing with the kids." Roger's expression hardened. "You want him to have a bad time inside. I want him to understand consequences. Real ones, not just a cell and 3 meals a day." That's dark, Simon. He tried to sell Emma and Noah. He helped murder 6 men. Legal justice means he might get out someday. Good behavior, parole, appeals. This ensures he faces justice from people who have their own codes about kids. Roger was quiet for a long moment. "Then I know a guy. Ex-Ranger. Works in corrections. Walla Walla State Pen is where they're sending Lopez and Olson." "Just information sharing," Simon said. "That's all I'm asking. Make sure the right inmates know who Carlton Olson is and what he did to children." "That's a death sentence, Simon. Prison justice for chomos. For anyone who hurts kids, it's brutal." "I know. You can live with that." Simon thought about Emma and Noah, safe in Montana, but traumatized. He thought about the other victims, the families destroyed. He thought about Denise laughing as she described selling his kids to a stranger in Singapore. "Yes," he said simply. "I can live with that." Roger nodded slowly. "Okay, but after this, we're done. No more revenge plays. You got kids to raise." "Agreed." As they parted ways, Simon felt the weight of what he'd set in motion. Legal scholars might debate the morality. Ethicists would condemn it. But Simon had spent 16 years in special operations learning that sometimes justice existed outside courtrooms and judges. Sometimes it existed in the dark spaces between what was legal and what was right. And sometimes you had to be willing to operate in those dark spaces to protect the people you loved. Chapter 7. Reckoning. 3 months later, Simon stood in a Seattle courthouse, watching Denise's preliminary hearing. She looked different, the expensive clothes and perfect makeup replaced by an orange jumpsuit and bare face. Her lawyer, Ben Ray, was still with her, but he looked frustrated. Without Denise's money, he was working pro bono, and it showed. Agent Sexton had been right. Building the case had taken time. But the evidence was overwhelming. Lopez had testified, providing detailed accounts of 6 murders. Digital forensics had recovered Denise's communications with Carlton and Lopez, planning each killing. And now, financial analysts were presenting evidence of systematic fraud and theft. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that they were only finding the accounts Simon had left for them to find. Small accounts, enough to prove financial motive, but not enough to fund a sophisticated defense. Simon sat in the gallery, Roger beside him. Emma and Noah were with Roger's sister Lauren in Montana, where they'd been for the past 3 months. Simon visited every weekend, but the kids needed stability and distance from the media circus. The defendant exploited her position as a military spouse, the prosecutor argued, targeting men who served their country with distinction. She married them, isolated them, drained their resources, and then had them killed for insurance payouts. This is premeditated murder, repeated multiple times over a decade, and represents one of the most calculating and cold-blooded schemes this court has seen. Ben Ray countered with technicalities, questioning the legality of the military extraction, arguing that Lopez's testimony was coerced, suggesting the digital evidence could have been tampered with. But his heart wasn't in it. Even he knew this case was unwinnable. Simon watched Denise's face. She stared straight ahead, expression blank. Only once did she glance back at the gallery, her eyes finding Simon. For a moment, something flickered there, recognition, hatred, maybe even fear. Then she looked away. The judge set a trial date, 8 months out. Bail was denied. Denise would remain in custody. Outside the courthouse, Simon gave a brief statement to the press. "I'm grateful to law enforcement for their thorough investigation. My focus now is on healing and protecting my children." Generic words. Safe words. They didn't capture the truth, but truth wasn't always meant for public consumption. 2 days later, news broke that Carlton Olson had been found dead in his cell at Walla Walla State Penitentiary. The official report said suicide. Olson had hanged himself using torn bedsheets. The unofficial report, the one that circulated among inmates and guards, said something different. Word had spread about what Olson had done, about the 2 kids he'd fathered and then tried to sell. Prison had its own code, and people who hurt children fell to the bottom of that hierarchy. Olson had been in protective custody, but protective custody couldn't stop everything. Simon read the news on his laptop, alone in his study. He felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction. Just the clinical acknowledgement that one threat had been neutralized. Roger called within the hour. "You see, I saw. How do you feel?" "Empty," Simon admitted. "I thought I'd feel something. Closure, maybe, but I just feel empty. That's normal. Revenge doesn't heal wounds, Simon. It just stops the bleeding." "What about Denise?" "Trial will proceed. Without Olson to corroborate her story, and with Lopez testifying against her, she's going away for life. Multiple life sentences, probably. And the kids? Therapist says they're doing okay. Emma had nightmares the first month, but they're decreasing. Noah's been quiet, but Lauren says he's opening up. They ask about you. I know. I talk to them every night." Simon closed his laptop. "I'm bringing them home next month. Lauren's been incredible, but they need to come home. Need to start rebuilding normal." "What about the DNA test?" That had been the other shoe waiting to drop. Agent Sexton had ordered paternity tests for Emma and Noah. The results had come back 2 weeks ago. Carlton wasn't their biological father, Simon said. Denise lied about that too. DNA says they're mine. Jesus Christ. She lied about her own kid's paternity? She lied about everything. The affair with Carlton was real, but the kids? They're mine. She made up the paternity thing to hurt me, to make me doubt them, doubt myself. That's sick. That's Denise. Simon felt something crack in his chest. Not heartbreak, but something close. I spent 3 months thinking those kids weren't biologically mine and realizing it didn't matter. That I'd love them and protect them regardless. And then I find out they are mine after all, and it's complicated. Yeah. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Roger said, "What are you going to tell them? About their mother, about all of this?" "The truth. Age appropriate, but the truth. They're smart kids. They'll figure it out eventually anyway. Better to hear it from me." "And your feelings about Denise?" Simon thought about the woman he'd married, the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. He thought about the moment she'd walked into his house, laughing about his impending death. "I'm done with her," he said finally. Done with anger, done with revenge, done with everything. She's going to prison forever. The family she hurt have been compensated. Carlton's dead. Lopez is facing death penalty. My kids are safe. That's all that matters now. Moving forward. Yeah, moving forward. After they hung up, Simon sat in his study for a long time, looking at photos of Emma and Noah on his desk. 7 years old, gap-toothed smiles, eyes full of trust. They'd been through hell. They'd heard their mother plot to sell them. They'd lost the woman they thought loved them. They'd learned their father wasn't weak or foolish, but something harder and more complicated. But they'd survived. They were safe. And Simon would spend the rest of his life making sure they stayed that way. He'd been a soldier once, fighting external enemies in foreign lands. Now he was fighting a different battle, building a life, creating safety, teaching two traumatized kids that the world could still be good despite the evil they'd seen. It was harder than combat, but it was worth it. Simon stood, turned off the lights in his study, and headed upstairs to call Emma and Noah for their nightly video chat. Tomorrow he'd start packing up the house. Too many bad memories here. They'd move somewhere new, start fresh. Montana maybe, near Roger's sister. Or maybe somewhere completely different, where no one knew their story. But tonight, he'd just be a father talking to his kids, telling them he loved them, promising everything would be okay. And this time it would be Chapter 8, The Final Verdict. 8 months passed like a slow-motion nightmare. Simon sold the Seattle house and moved to Whitefish, Montana, a small town near Glacier National Park, far from media attention and painful memories. He bought a cabin with acreage, space for Emma and Noah to run and play and heal. He set up a new workshop, started taking custom furniture orders again, built routines that felt safe and normal. The twins thrived. Therapy helped, but time and distance helped more. Emma's nightmares stopped. Noah started smiling again. They made friends at their new school, joined soccer, went hiking with Simon on weekends. Slowly, painfully they healed, but the trial loomed unavoidable. Simon flew back to Seattle in early November, the city gray and rain-soaked as ever. The trial was expected to last 3 weeks. Denise faced 6 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, child trafficking, fraud, and 24 lesser charges. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented evidence chronologically, building a picture of a woman who'd made a career out of seducing, defrauding, and murdering military men. Agent Sexton testified first, walking the jury through the investigation. Then came Roger Villanueva, explaining how he'd first spotted Denise meeting with Darren Lopez. Darren Lopez testified on day 3. He'd made a deal, testifying against Denise in exchange for life without parole instead of the death penalty. He described 6 murders in clinical detail: the car accident that killed Major Eric Holloway, the drowning that killed Captain Randall Morrison, for others. Each meticulously planned, each made to look accidental. Denise would give us the insurance policies, the schedules, everything, Lopez said. We'd wait for the right moment. Carlton and I would handle the physical work. Denise would play the grieving widow. Then we'd split the money. And Captain Christensen, the prosecutor asked, was supposed to be number 7, but he had that tracker thing. Military training. We underestimated him. Then Ray cross-examined, but Lopez didn't budge. He'd made his peace with spending life in prison. Denise going down with him was all he wanted now. Digital forensics experts testified about the recovered communications. Financial analysts explained the shell companies and offshore accounts. Letha O'Neill, the adoption facilitator, testified about the planned sale of Emma and Noah to Singapore. On day 7, Simon took the stand. He'd prepared for this, practiced with the prosecutor, knew what to expect. But walking into that courtroom, seeing Denise sitting at the defense table, emotionless and cold, it still hit him like a punch. The prosecutor took him through his testimony carefully. Meeting Denise, their marriage, the birth of the twins, his transition out of the military. Then the suspicions, the evidence Roger uncovered, the night of his intended murder. Captain Christensen, in your own words, what happened that night? Simon described it, being zip-tied to the chair, the 3 kidnappers, and then Denise walking in. Her confession, her laughter, her plan to sell Emma and Noah. She said, and I quote, "You're dead. The kids will be gone. Sold to a nice family in Singapore who pays top dollar for American kids. And I get everything." The jury was riveted. 2 women in the front row looked nauseated. And what did you do then? Activated my emergency extraction beacon. My military unit responded within 10 minutes. Ben Ray's cross-examination tried to paint Simon as paranoid, controlling, potentially abusive. But it didn't land. Simon's service record was spotless. His character witnesses, Roger, other veterans, neighbors, teachers from Emma and Noah's school, all testified to his integrity and devotion to his children. Isn't it true, Ben Ray pressed, that you've spent years in combat zones engaged in violence? That you have PTSD? I have some symptoms, Simon acknowledged. I've been in therapy for 3 years. But that doesn't make me violent or unstable. It makes me human. And isn't it possible that your combat experience made you paranoid? That you imagined threats where none existed? No, Simon said calmly. Because the threats were real. Your client tried to have me killed and my children sold. Those aren't paranoid delusions. Those are documented facts. The trial turned on day 12 when the prosecution played recordings from the night of Simon's rescue. The tactical teams had been wearing body cameras. Every word Denise spoke had been recorded. The jury listened in silence to Denise's voice, finally free. You're dead. Kids will be gone. I get everything. And then, most damning, they're not even yours. Carlton is their real father. This was always the plan. Find some military sucker, wait for the benefits to pile up, then cash out. The prosecution paused the recording. To be clear, DNA testing subsequently proved that claim to be false. Emma and Noah are biologically Captain Christensen's children. The defendant lied about their paternity as part of her psychological manipulation. Ben Ray objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard Denise in her own voice, gloating about murder and child trafficking, lying about her own children's paternity to cause maximum pain. On day 14, Denise finally testified in her own defense. It was a calculated risk, but Ben Ray had no choice. The evidence was too overwhelming. She needed to humanize herself somehow. She tried, claimed she was afraid of Simon, that he was controlling and violent, said Lopez and Carlton had manipulated her, that she'd been trapped in an abusive situation, cried on the stand, explaining she'd only said those horrible things because she was terrified Simon would kill her. The prosecutor's cross-examination destroyed her. Ms. Christensen, you claim you were afraid of your husband. Yet text messages show you met Carlton Olson in hotels at least 20 times during your marriage. You traveled to see him. You planned vacations with him. Does that sound like someone who was trapped? Denise had no good answer. You claim Darren Lopez manipulated you. Yet financial records show you paid him $250,000 for his services. You initiated contact. You provided the insurance policies and schedules. Correct? I was coerced. By whom? You were the one with the money. The accounts. The plans. Lopez was your employee, wasn't he? He threatened me. Yet you called him. Paid him. Met with him dozens of times over 10 years. These aren't the actions of someone being coerced, are they? Denise's composure cracked. You don't understand. I love Carlton. We were together for 15 years. Simon was just a means to an end. The courtroom went silent. Ben Ray looked like he wanted to disappear. The prosecutor smiled slightly. So you admit that your marriage to Captain Christensen was fraudulent from the beginning? That's not. You admit that you planned to defraud him, steal his assets, and have him killed? No. I mean, Carlton and I. Denise's face flushed red, realizing her mistake. And the other 5 victims? Major Holloway, Captain Morrison, the others? Were they also means to an end? Denise tried to recover, claiming she'd misspoken, but it was too late. The jury had seen behind the mask. Whatever sympathy she might have generated evaporated. The defense rested. Closing arguments took another day. Then the jury deliberated. 4 hours later, they returned. Guilty on all counts. Denise showed no reaction, just stared straight ahead as the verdicts were read. 6 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, child trafficking, fraud. The list went on. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman named Annabelle Shaw, showed no mercy. Ms. Christensen, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never encountered a defendant more calculating or cold-blooded. You turned marriage into murder for profit. You betrayed men who served their country with honor and distinction. Most heinously, you attempted to sell your own children, children you bore, children who loved you, to strangers for cash. Denise finally showed emotion, tears running down her face, shoulders shaking. Save your tears, Judge Shah said coldly. The jury saw through your manipulations, and so do I. I hereby sentence you to 6 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. You will die in prison, and that is far less than you deserve. As bailiffs led Denise away, she looked back one final time at Simon. Whatever she saw on his face made her look away quickly, fresh tears streaming. Simon felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure. Just the hollow knowledge that it was finally over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Simon gave a brief statement. Justice has been served. My focus now is on my children and building a peaceful life. Thank you. Roger was waiting by the car. How do you feel? Tired, Simon admitted. Ready to go home. To Emma and Noah? Yeah, to my kids. As they drove away from the courthouse, Simon looked back once at the building. Denise was inside, beginning a life sentence. Carlton was dead. Lopez was on death row. The victims' families had been compensated. Justice, in its way, had been done. But Simon knew the real work was just beginning. Emma and Noah needed him. They needed stability, love, therapy, patience. They needed a father who could help them heal from their mother's betrayal. That was Simon's mission now. Not combat, not revenge, but healing. And for the first time in months, he felt ready for it. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. Spring came to Montana with wildflowers and snowmelt, the mountains shedding their winter coats to reveal green valleys below. Simon stood on his cabin's porch, watching Emma and Noah play in the yard with their new dog, a rescue mutt named Ranger that Roger had brought them for Christmas. 15 months had passed since the trial. 15 months of therapy sessions, parent-teacher conferences, nightmares, breakthroughs, setbacks, and healing. It had been the hardest year of Simon's life, harder even than combat deployments. But they were making it. Emma had mostly stopped asking about her mother. She'd attended a few therapy sessions designed to help children of incarcerated parents, but ultimately decided she didn't want contact. She tried to hurt us, Emma had said simply. I don't want to talk to people who want to hurt me. Noah had been quieter about it, processing in his own way. But he too had made his peace with having a mother who'd chosen evil. The therapist said both kids were remarkably resilient, probably because they had a father who was present, honest, and emotionally available. Simon had worked hard to be that father. He'd done his own therapy, processing the betrayal and trauma. He learned to talk about his feelings, to be vulnerable, to show Emma and Noah that strength didn't mean pretending pain didn't exist. And slowly, they built a new life. Roger visited twice a month, usually bringing his girlfriend Shelby Gonzalez, a park ranger at Glacier whom he'd met on a hiking trail. The kids adored her, especially when she taught them about wildlife tracking and wilderness survival. Simon's furniture business thrived in unexpected ways. He'd started offering classes at the local community center, woodworking for veterans, a way to teach skills and provide therapy through craftsmanship. 20 veterans now showed up every Saturday, building tables and chairs and healing alongside each other. He'd also started dating cautiously, slowly. A woman named Sophie Ball who worked at the local library and didn't care about his past, only his present. She was patient with his trust issues and kind to his kids. It wasn't love yet, but might be someday. The knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Agent Sexton stood there, looking older but less weary than during the trial. Captain Christensen, mind if I come in? They sat in Simon's living room, coffee between them. Through the window, Emma and Noah's laughter drifted inside. I'm not here officially, Sexton said. This is more of a professional courtesy visit. About Darren Lopez was executed 2 weeks ago. Lethal injection at Walla Walla. Went quietly, apparently. Said he deserved it. Simon nodded. He'd known it was coming, but hadn't followed the details. And Denise, adjusting to prison life. Or not adjusting. Really. She's in maximum security, general population. Having a hard time. Sexton met Simon's eyes. There was an incident 3 months ago. Another inmate, someone whose military husband was killed in action, recognized Denise from the trial coverage. Put her in the infirmary for 2 weeks. I'm not sorry to hear that. I didn't think you would be. But Simon, Sexton leaned forward. There's been some questions about the missing money. Simon kept his expression neutral. I don't understand. We recovered about $1 million from Denise's accounts. But we know there was more, a lot more. Lopez testified to payments totaling $7 million over the years. We found $1 million. The other $6 million vanished. Vanished. Transferred out of her accounts in the 48 hours after your rescue. Moved through cryptocurrency tumblers. Routed through multiple countries. Untraceable. Sexton smiled slightly. Someone with military-grade electronic warfare training could have done it. Someone with access to Denise's devices during that short window when they were in evidence. Simon sipped his coffee. That sounds like a serious crime. It would be, if we could prove it happened. But we can't. The investigation is closed. Officially, Denise spent or hid the money before her arrest, and it's gone. Sexton stood. But here's the interesting thing. The families of her victims, every single one, received anonymous donations. Substantial donations. Enough to rebuild their lives. That's nice for them. Yeah, nice. Sexton moved to the door, then paused. You know what I think, Simon? I think sometimes justice exists outside courtrooms. Sometimes it needs a push to work right. And sometimes people like me are smart enough to know when to stop asking questions. He offered his hand. Simon shook it. Take care of those kids, Sexton said. They're lucky to have you. After the agent left, Simon returned to the porch. Emma ran up, breathless and covered in mud. Dad, can Ranger sleep in my room tonight? Please, as long as you give him a bath first. He's as muddy as you are. Emma squealed and ran off to find Noah. Simon watched them go. These kids he'd raised and protected and loved. Kids who'd survived evil and come out the other side scarred but strong. His phone buzzed. A text from Roger. Heard about the visit. Everything okay? Simon replied, everything's fine. Some questions, but nothing they can prove. We're safe. Good. Shelby wants to take the kids rock climbing next weekend. You in? We're in. Simon pocketed his phone and looked out at the mountains. Somewhere in a Seattle prison, Denise was serving 6 life sentences. Darren Lopez was dead. Carlton Olson was dead. The conspiracy that had killed 6 men and targeted him and his children was finished. But Simon was done looking backward. Done with revenge, done with anger, done with everything except the simple work of being a father and building a good life. He'd been a soldier once, trained to kill and destroy. Then he'd been a victim, betrayed by someone he'd trusted. Then he'd been an operator again, moving in shadows to ensure justice was done. Now he was just Simon Christensen, father to Emma and Noah, woodworker, veteran helping other veterans. Maybe, eventually, husband to someone who deserved trust. The past was buried. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. Emma's laughter rang out across the yard, pure and joyful. Noah joined in, the sound of children who felt safe and loved. And Simon smiled, content in the knowledge that he'd done what needed doing. He'd protected his kids. He'd ensured justice. He'd survived. More importantly, he'd taught Emma and Noah that survival wasn't enough. They had to thrive, to build, to love despite the evil they'd seen. That was the real victory. Not revenge, not punishment, but choosing life and joy and hope in the face of darkness. Simon raised his coffee cup in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to hard-won peace, to the future. Then he set it down and went to help his kids give a very muddy dog a very necessary bath. It was a good day. It was finally a good life. And that was enough. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.